We're going to move on and we're going to talk about some epic white pills, some epic meme magic. I feel the meme magic is returning. I don't know about everybody watching the show, but it seems like the energy is picked up, and it maybe wasn't like that even just a few months ago. But all of a sudden, it feels like it's back with us. I didn't think it would be this way. I thought 2020 was going to be similar to 2018. Kind of disappointing, reluctantly going out for Trump. But it's really shaping up to be, in a lot of ways, a similar energy to what we experienced a couple of years ago with Kavanaugh, or 4 years ago with Trump, even a year ago with Groyper War. I feel like it's coming back. And a part of that is some of this really good stuff on immigration. And these are just a couple of developments from today. Like I said, slow news day, but probably this isn't getting a lot of play in the media anyway. Two solid developments on immigration. The first is about the border wall, which we're now approaching already 400 miles. And I know we talked about 300 miles on the show. I think that was the week of the convention, which was the last week in August. And now they're planning on a ceremony for 400 miles. And this is from, I think this is from New York Times. It says, quote, "The Trump administration is racing to build the president's border wall as quickly as possible ahead of the November 3rd election, with construction crews now adding nearly 2 miles per day. It is an unprecedented pace toward meeting one of Trump's signature 2016 campaign promises. CBP officials are preparing a ceremony for Trump next month that will mark the completion of 400 miles of new wall. The administration has installed more than 341 miles so far, according to the latest figure, and CBP officials say they remain on track to finish at least 450 miles by the end of 2020. So understand, even if Trump loses the election, the construction goes forward. So whether Biden wins the election or Trump wins the election, of course, the new president doesn't take office until January 20th, 2021. So at a pace of 2 miles per day, at least 450 by the end of the year, you're talking about possibly, quite possibly, 500 miles of border wall, even if Trump doesn't win a second term when all is said and done, which is substantial, because I know for years people on the left and even a lot of people on the right said it's never going to happen. Your border wall, it won't go. You won't be able to get the money. And we went through. I started this show in February 2017. I think February 5th or 6th. So just 2 or 3 weeks after the inauguration, I followed every step of the way. I've literally not missed a single part of it. The battle over the budget to appropriate the money for the wall. And I remember the omnibus spending bill and the first government shutdown and the second government shutdown and everything, all the different hoops that we have had to jump through, the different kinds of schemes, private funding, and then finally resorting to the emergency funding from the Pentagon. We've been through the appropriations battle, the legal battle in the Supreme Court and everywhere else to try to accomplish this. And against all odds, it's happening. We're pulling it out. You can no longer say that it is insignificant. And I remember even a year ago or 2 years ago, I think I even debated R.C. Maxwell about this last summer. And I said, look, I want to support the president, and I am going to vote for him. I said, but he's failed on immigration. He's only built like 3 new miles of border wall and 100 and some overall, 100 miles of replacement fencing and maybe 3 miles of new border wall. I said, that's just terrible. And even people like Ann Coulter for years tweeting, update on the border wall, 0 miles completed today, 0 miles yesterday, next update tomorrow. I'm sure people remember this. And now here we are. I have to say, even I was wrong. I think a lot of people are proved wrong. And we are heading towards, with or without a second term, a serious and substantial amount of border wall being completed. And the kind of wall that we're talking about is serious. You know, some people initially were dubious about what was actually being put up on the border. They said, well, you're replacing existing fencing, was one of the excuses. But in reality, the existing barrier that was there was not designed to stop people. And on top of that, it's dilapidated. So, for instance, in some spaces you had fencing that was only intended to stop vehicles. And as such, it was very easy for people to simply walk in between the fence or quite literally just step over it. And then on top of that, that's how it's supposed to work. And then it's dilapidated on top of that. That's where most of the fencing was. This is being replaced by 18-foot tall steel bollard fencing with a climbing plate on top. If you've ever seen the pictures, even with President Trump standing in front of it, it's massive. So this is a serious barrier that is a substantial improvement over what existed. And now you've got new miles where there was no barrier before. On top of that, if you remember, back in, I think it was 2018, it might have been 2017, but I think it was January 2018, the president and the White House put out the specifications on exactly what kind of border wall they wanted to build. And they put out that so that they could create a target for appropriations. And they said that the border wall would cost about $17 billion. And they said they only needed it in 1,000 miles out of the 2,000 miles of the border because half of the border is covered by natural barriers like rivers and mountains and things like that. So you only really need to cover 1,000 miles. That was the intention from even 2.5 years ago or 2 3/4 years ago. And if that's the target, 1,000 miles of wall, we've completed nearly half of that, like I said, before the first term is even over. So that's very exciting, very epic. I will also say it's kind of funny. There was another little piece in this report. It says Trump has urged several design changes to the barrier to make its appearance more intimidating, insisting, for instance, that it should be painted black to absorb more solar radiation. CBP officials said they do not have the funding available to order crews to go back and paint segments that they have installed, but 4 sections are currently under construction in Texas, and they will receive a black finish before installation, fulfilling Trump's wishes. So, and I think that's kind of nice because one of the things that was so awesome about the border wall is more than anything, it was supposed to be a middle finger to Mexico and a middle finger to globalists. It was supposed to send a message to say, this is America and that's Mexico. And there is a distinction and there are differences and we are going to enforce those differences. In a lot of ways, it was very symbolic because at a time when globalism was erasing national cultures and national borders and national governments, to say that we are simply going to build a physical, tangible structure on the border to demarcate where our nation begins and ends, it was a very symbolic thing to say that nationalism in America is back. It's not going away. But intrinsic to that was Trump's language about the wall, that it's always getting 10 feet taller and it's going to be strong and powerful. And they talked about having it electrified or putting solar panels on it, or, you know, we heard so many crazy things about this. And there's something I like about that we're painting it black so that if an immigrant even touches it, they're just going to get their hand melted off or something. So that it even just looks intimidating, so that somebody will come up to it and they'll turn back in fear. And this is such a powerful rebuke of the Statue of Liberty ideology, you know, that Lazarus poem about, give me you're tired, you're hungry, and all of that. And the border wall says, get the fuck out of here, stay away. You don't have your papers, you know, oh, you're not American? Well, turn around, go back to the slum, go back to that shithole you came from. So that's just a little cherry on top that I find particularly satisfying, but the wall's going up. People didn't think it would happen, but the wall's going up. And, you know, a lot of Trump haters, even to this day, will say, oh, Trump hasn't done anything. He's cucked. We're disappointed. Honestly, what's a disappointment? This is only one of many things that is happening. But I want to move on and talk about the other development about the refugees, which I talked about earlier. This is the other major white pill on immigration. It says, quote, Donald Trump's administration has announced plans to let only 15,000 refugees resettle in the United States in the 2021 fiscal year that began on Thursday, setting another record low in the history of the modern refugee program and promoting outrage from civil rights groups. The U.S. State Department said the ceiling reflects the Trump administration's prioritizing of the safety and well-being of Americans, especially in light of the ongoing COVID pandemic. Trump, seeking re-election on November 3rd, has slashed refugee admissions every year since taking office in 2017. Critics have said that the United States under Trump has abandoned its long-standing role as a safe haven for persecuted people, and that cutting refugee admissions undermines other foreign policy goals. Oh, really? Like what? Israel's foreign policy goals or world Jewry's foreign? I mean, what foreign policy goals does it undermine by taking less people that are going to cause problems? Anyway, the proposal for fiscal year 2021 allows 3,000 fewer refugees than in the last fiscal year. The U.S. had been already on course during the 2020 fiscal year to admit the lowest level of refugees since 1980. Only a little more than 9,000 refugees had been admitted to the U.S. as of August 31st, according to the Refugee Processing Center. So this is yet another epic development. No refugees, no immigrants, no refugees, the wall's going up. As far as I can tell, virtually everything that the president can do on immigration has been done. The borders right now are closed. They're closed to people even exiting and entering, even if they're coming in and out to do business or for school or something like that because of COVID. The borders are on lockdown. People that declare asylum are left in Mexico. The asylum rules have been revised. The public charge rule is cutting legal immigration substantially. Work visas have been halted. There was a little bit on H-1Bs recently in August where they permitted some to go in, but for the most part, work visas and green cards are effectively suspended. The border wall is going up. We're nearing 400 miles, building 2 miles per day. Refugee cap is at an all-time low. I mean, just about any way that you cut it, we are cutting illegal immigration, legal immigration, and creating even lasting solutions in the policy regime that's being built up and, of course, the physical barrier that's being constructed as well. So as far as immigration goes, I don't know what there is to complain about. The projection for fiscal year 2021 is that we will have 600,000 immigrants come in next year, which is a 49% decrease from the fiscal year 2016. Which is, of course, the last year that Barack Obama was in office. So it's a 50% cut in legal immigration. We're halfway done with the border wall. I mean, I don't know what more people expect. People still complain, and I would understand some of those complaints last year or a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, but you just have nothing to say anymore on this question of immigration. The evidence is overwhelming that we are doing more than any other president in modern history to restrict immigration, more than anybody, more than even people that were trying, people that weren't trying. I think more than people even thought possible. So I see numbers like this. Refugees, by the way, which were at close to 100,000, I think maybe even more when Barack Obama was in office, to 9,000, 10%. Or a 90% reduction, I should say, from when Obama was in office with refugees. Is that not very substantial? And Joe Biden promises to increase it to 115,000, which is the highest it's ever been. So on immigration, I'm feeling the meme magic. I'm feeling white-pilled. It is almost, there's something that is so redeeming about it because I remember when Trump first got into office and it was actually kind of disappointing. Because we had all this energy and all this momentum from 2016, and then it seemed like very quickly it became apparent that nothing was going to work out in our favor. The Trump administration was co-opted, and we were bogged down in all this legal stuff, like the Russia investigation. And then disappointments like the Syria strike. For a lot of people, they didn't like that. And then Trump tried to make a deal on DACA that fall 2017, and then in January 2018, and then the omnibus spending bill, that March was a disaster, and then the midterms we got killed, and then there was that horrible government shutdown last year. It seemed like just this cascading series of setbacks, complications, failures, disappointments, and like I said, I would have understood feeling like that a couple of years ago. And it was crushing at the time. I remember going from the most white-pilled, pro-Trump guy next to Bill Mitchell to totally black-pilled, borderline just jumping ship, leaving the Trump train But it's finally come full circle. And it also goes to show, I've made this argument before, it proves the efficacy of politics, which is to say, in a lot of ways, it wasn't just about Trump. What was riding on this administration succeeding was even bigger than that. It was also about the efficacy and the viability of politics itself. A lot of people argued when Trump started to fail that if Trump couldn't achieve these unrealistic expectations on an unrealistic timeline, well, that means that politics entirely is something that is not going to help us. It's a waste of time to engage in politics. Because if we elected Trump and Trump didn't do it right out of the gate exactly the way that we wanted, well, that just means that the only way out of this is through violence, or the only way out of this is through some other strategy that was not articulated or something that is harmful for people. And it was people like me that said, look, it's setbacks, it's complications. Even if Trump is a failure, we have to build on it. Politics is the art of the possible. We have to take what's been done, salvage what we can, and we have to try to build on whatever's left. In the next election, in the next cycle, we have to put people in so that in 20 years or 15 years or something, maybe they'll be the party. But over the course of the past 3 years, the argument was, the point being, it wasn't just about whether Trump is doing good or he's doing bad, or whether Trump is our guy or he isn't our guy. Overall, it was about whether or not politics was a worthwhile means to accomplish our political objectives. And I always argued that it's a low time preference strategy, and it's something that requires patience and resolve and prudence, but ultimately that's the approach that will pay off in the long run. And a lot of people said, oh, no, that's inaction. If you're in favor of that, you're not in favor of doing anything. That is inaction, it's ineffective, and you're just saying that so that you'll slow us down, or you're saying that so that we're going to stay controlled, or we're not going to rise up or something. But hey, case in point, here we are 3.5 years later. The immigration regime is much better. The wall is going up. There is a antitrust suit being brought against Google by the DOJ as we speak. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are winding down, as they already did in Syria. Our presence and our footprint in the Middle East is diminishing. Trade and the economy are better than ever. I mean, you could go down the list on these issues, and you could say on virtually every one that it's better than it was before. And bigger than that even, take a look at the right-wing scene. Look at somebody like Tucker Carlson, who has 5 million viewers per night. He's the biggest cable news host in the history of television, in the history of America. Understand that. And he is preaching a message of national conservatism, of Trumpism, maybe of something more implicit. But he is the most important mouthpiece, or the most, that maybe sounds nasty, but the most important voice that there exists in America today. And in a lot of ways, he's echoing things that we've been saying for a long time and the things that need to be said. The Trump administration, it seems, is revanchist. It's recapturing that nationalism that it had back in 2016. It seems that there are America First forces rising up all across politics. And even the mainstream voices like Shapiro or Walsh or Charlie Kirk are sounding like us too. It's working, is the message. The white pill in seeing these things is that it's all working. It's all going according to plan. So I see those two developments, and like I said, it's awesome. It's meme magic. It feels like the Trump administration we were always meant to have, but it's also one of those cases of like good things come to those who wait. We were there and we focused on the details and we pushed through for years. I started this show February 2017, probably the worst time to do it. After all the hype of the election ended and when things started to get more difficult, but we pushed through, and here we are now on the other side, and it's honestly maybe more satisfying than it would have been if it happened right away. So I'm white-pilled. I'm white-pilled all around. We got the pumpkin. We got the refugees are not coming here. We're not taking any more poor people. We're not taking any more poor Arabs or Muslims or Mexicans or blacks or anybody for that matter. And if they try to come over here, their faces are going to melt. They're going to be like in a cheese grater. They'll fall right through it. They'll put their hands on it and it'll just get diced up because they'll just start melting. So It's meme magic all over again. But we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about our feature.